Living in Brazil has changed me in many ways, and in this video I want to explain what those changes are, and most of them have been positive. Okay, so the first way Brazil has changed me is that I've gone from taking 1 shower a week to 14 showers a week. Okay, maybe that was a bit of an exaggeration, but I am taking a lot more showers here in Brazil than I did in Sweden. So in Sweden there are many people who don't take a daily shower. So I mean, if you Google it, it says that Swedes on average take 5.5 showers a week, which is less than 1 shower a day. And you have to remember, this is an average, so there must be lots of people who take even less showers than 5.5 showers a week. Now, I wasn't one of those. I took 1 shower a day, so 7 showers a week. But I do know some people who take less showers than that. And now here in Brazil, especially in summertime, I can take 2 showers a day, which would be 14 showers a week. Now, to a lot of people, that probably sounds super excessive. But you have to remember, here in Brazil, it can get super hot. And so you kind of wake up in the morning a bit sweaty, so you need to take a shower then. And then in the evening, you come home and you've been out and about and in the hot weather the whole day, and you need to take another shower. And so, yeah, in Sweden, it's a lot colder. You don't sweat that much. So you definitely don't need to take as many showers. But still, I would feel weird if I didn't take 1 shower a day. And then another way Brazil has changed me is that I place a lot more importance now on oral hygiene. So in Brazil, it's very common for people to brush their teeth 3 times, so in the morning, after lunch, and then in the evening, which is definitely not the case in Sweden. Usually you just brush your teeth 2 times in the morning and the evening. But now that I've got used to brushing my teeth 3 times a day, there's no way I can go back to brushing just 2 times a day. I just feel weird now if I don't brush my teeth after lunch, because you do get some food stuck in your teeth after lunch. And you don't want to be walking around talking to people the whole afternoon and the evening with food stuck in your teeth, that's for sure. So that's definitely a positive habit that I picked up from Brazil. But what that does mean is that a lot of people, they take a toothbrush and toothpaste with them to work, so they can brush their teeth in the bathroom, at work, after lunch. And I'm just imagining if someone does that in Sweden at work, people would just think that is so weird. But here in Brazil, it's super common. So yeah, this habit that I picked up from Brazil I think is really good. But then also Brazilians are very focused on having really nice teeth as well. So in general, they go to the dentist more often. They do a lot more dental procedures. So I remember when I arrived here in Brazil and I went to my Brazilian dentist here in Brazil for the first time. And he looked at my teeth and he said, "Would you like a quote for some procedures to improve your teeth?" And I looked at him and I went, "What's wrong with my teeth? My Swedish dentist always said I had good teeth." And he said, "Well, it'd be good for you to have braces so you can just align your teeth a bit better and then whiten your teeth a bit." And I think he said some other procedures as well. I can't remember. And at the time, I just looked at him and went, "Yeah, no, I'm not doing anything. Just make sure I haven't got any cavities and, you clean my teeth. That's about it." But now, having been in Brazil for a longer time, I realized that, yeah, actually, maybe it'd be good to do a few things to my teeth. So I've started using Invisalign, which are these things here. And you wear them during the day and night, and they gradually align your teeth. Instead of wearing metal braces, you just wear these transparent Invisalign. So yeah, I'm trying out those just to improve my teeth a bit, and let's see what else I do after that. But yeah, I've been affected a bit by the Brazilian obsession to have really nice looking teeth. And then another way Brazil has changed me is on my eating habits. So back in Sweden, I used to have a very quick and simple breakfast and lunch, and then the main big meal was dinner time. But now, having lived in Brazil, that has totally changed. So for breakfast back in Sweden, I used to eat some cereal with some milk, and you have a wide selection of cereals that you can choose from in the supermarket. But now in Brazil, I've adopted, I think, a more healthier breakfast. So I just eat some fruit. So that can be papaya, goiaba, or just banana. Usually I sprinkle a bit of oats on top. And that's it, and I feel a lot better and healthier eating that compared to eating some industrialized processed cereals. And eating some fruit for breakfast is very common here in Brazil, and you can see that in the supermarket as well. And if you go to the cereal aisle in a Brazilian supermarket, it's tiny, it's usually just one shelf, and most of the cereals are aimed at kids with lots of sugar. So it just shows that eating cereal for breakfast is just not very common here in Brazil. And then the way I eat lunch as well has changed a lot since I arrived here in Brazil. So I used to just eat a very simple lunch, maybe a sandwich, and usually at my desk at work. So lunch took like 5-10 minutes maximum, and then I was back working. So something super quick and simple. But now here in Brazil, I have a proper meal for lunch. So either my wife and I cook a proper meal at home for lunch, or we go to a restaurant. But now lunch is the main meal for me, which is definitely not the case in Sweden. Because in Sweden, the main meal is dinner time. So that's when everyone's at home from work and school, and so families usually cook a meal, sit down and eat dinner together. But now I've shifted that to lunch, and now dinner is just a simple light meal like a salad or a sandwich. And then another change related to the first one is that I've made some significant changes in what I eat as well after moving here to Brazil. So back in Sweden, I used to eat one thing a lot, and that's potatoes. So we Swedes, we love potatoes. I think it's partly because potatoes grow really well in Sweden. So you combine potatoes with everything from, beef, pork, chicken, fish. Usually the potatoes are steamed or boiled, so it's pretty healthy. And now having moved to Brazil, I still eat potatoes, but less. Now I eat a lot more rice rather than potatoes. And one other thing, which is beans. That's definitely something new for me, because in Sweden, I hardly ate any beans. The only time I ate beans in Sweden was baked beans. So it's those white beans in tomato sauce that you get in cans. Those were the only beans I ate in Sweden. But now I eat a lot of beans. Now a lot of Brazilians, they eat rice and beans every day. So they combine it with some meat and some vegetables. Now I haven't gone that crazy about rice and beans, but I do eat it a couple of times a week. And if you go to restaurants here in Brazil, most of them, in particular the buffet ones, nearly all of them will serve rice and beans. And I think my diet has improved as a result of eating more rice and beans, because I think they're pretty healthy, especially if you eat whole grain rice and you eat a variety of different types of beans. And they're a great source of protein, fiber, and they're low fat as well. But then another change in my diet, which I guess maybe is slightly less healthy, is that I'm eating a lot more beef now. And that's because the beef tastes so much better here in Brazil than it does in Sweden. And also it's a lot cheaper. I haven't quite worked out why the beef tastes so much better here in Brazil. A lot of people say it's the type of cattle they have here in Brazil, and also the fact that they're on these large farms and they're able to be outside, grazing on natural grass. Now, I'm not sure, but what I do know is that the beef tastes better. So just buying like a simple steak in the supermarket and take it home and cook, it tastes a lot better than if you were to do it in Sweden. And then you have special cuts of beef here in Brazil, which you don't have in Sweden, like picanha, which is the top sirloin cap. And Brazilians love to barbecue this cut of meat just with a bit of salt, and it tastes really good. The barbecues here in Brazil are so much better than Sweden. And then another way Brazil has changed me is that I only drink ice cold beer now. Back in Sweden, I used to drink lager, which was kept in the fridge. It was a bit cold, but it wasn't ice cold. But then also in Sweden, I used to drink ale, and that beer is at room temperature, so it can be a bit warm actually. And I did like drinking ale, but now that I've become accustomed to drinking ice cold beer here in Brazil, I can't go back to drinking the room temperature ales and the other stuff. And I think one of the reasons why Brazilians like to drink ice cold beers is the fact that it can be really hot here in Brazil, especially in summertime. And there's nothing more refreshing than just having an ice cold beer when it's super hot outside. But also some say that some of the beer here in Brazil isn't the greatest quality. And so in order to hide the taste of the cheaper beer, if you serve it ice cold, it tastes a lot better. Now, I agree, there are some beers here in Brazil which are pretty cheap and don't taste the best. But there are lots of really good beers here, especially from the smaller breweries. It's kind of a trend over the last couple of years here in Brazil that lots of small microbreweries have been popping up, making some really good beers. And I actually tried one beer recently called Fruitopia, which apparently is the best beer in Brazil in 2025, so this year. And this beer is made with strawberries, lemons, and tangerines, and I think some other fruits as well. And it tasted really good. So yeah, I guess that's one way that Brazil has changed me, which isn't the healthiest, and that is that I'm drinking more beer now here in Brazil, and it has to be ice cold. Okay, and another way I've changed since moving here to Brazil is that I go to the doctor a lot more often here in Brazil than I did in Sweden. So back in Sweden, I used to never go to doctors. Only if I was nearly dying would I, crawl to the doctor and ask for some help. But if it was something less serious than that, then I would just try and sort it out myself. But now in Brazil, I'm going to the doctor a lot more often, probably every couple of months or so. So if I'm feeling a bit sick or I've got a pain or something, then I'll go to the doctor just to have it checked out, which I probably wouldn't do in Sweden. But then also I go to the doctor a lot more often here in Brazil to do checkups, which you hardly do in Sweden. So I go to the doctor and do an annual blood test, check on cholesterol, vitamins, minerals, prostate, and some other things. So I do that once a year, and then I go to a dermatologist once a year just to have a checkup on my skin to make sure there are no problems there. And then I have lots of other checkups, which isn't every year, which is every kind of 2 to 4 years. So I did an endoscopy and colonoscopy. So they put a camera down the throat and in the butt as well to check the stomach, the intestine, the colon, and to make sure everything's healthy there and no cancer or anything. And then also do some heart exams, eye exams, and so on, which again is kind of every couple of years. And in Sweden, I wouldn't do any of these checkups. And that's partly because I have private health insurance here in Brazil, which allows me to do all of that. While in Sweden, you use the public health service a lot more, and there they can't afford for the whole population to do lots of checkups every year. That would just cost the government too much. And then also the private health insurance as well I had is a lot more limited in the things that you can do. So I mean, in Sweden, the doctors would only approve for you to do some exams if you had some symptoms and they were worried that you might be sick. But otherwise, the exams you can do are very limited to just some specific things, and generally as you get older. And also another thing is how you're treated by your doctors in Sweden as well. So I think in Sweden, the doctors are a bit less willing to listen to you and listen to the patient. So they kind of just want to treat and get the patient out the door as quickly as possible. And definitely if you were to just go to the doctor and go, I'm feeling fine, but I'd like to do some exams just in case, they just look at you and go, what are you doing here? You're wasting my time. So yeah, I'm very positive about the health system here in Brazil. Just be aware that I do a lot of the stuff privately. And if you were to just go to the public health service here in Brazil, then you wouldn't be able to do all of these things. Depending on where you live, the public health service might not be the best. And then another way Brazil has changed me is that I appreciate the sun a lot more here in Brazil. So in Sweden, you have a lot of overcast days where it's just cloudy, or it's raining and snowing. And also in wintertime, the days are pretty short as well. So you can have like 6 hours of daylight in wintertime, and the rest of the time it's dark. And a lot of times those 6 hours of daylight you have is just overcast days, so you don't actually see the sun. But for me, that was normal. I didn't really notice that the sun didn't come out or not. I didn't pay that much attention to it. But now that I moved to Brazil, we have a lot more sunny days than you have in Sweden. I've started to appreciate that a lot more. So now when it is cloudy and rainy here in Brazil, I react and go, oh no, where's the sun? And it just makes me feel a lot better living in a country with a lot more sunshine. So I mean, I was suffering from depression back in Sweden. Now that depression is completely gone. So I think it was partly connected to the weather and the climate. And yeah, I just feel a lot better with this climate that Brazil has. However, one funny thing about when it rains here in Brazil is that in general, people don't like to leave the house when it rains. I mean, sometimes it rains really heavily and I don't understand it. But when it's just drizzling a bit and so on, and I say to my wife, come on, let's take the dogs for a walk. And my wife's like, what, are you crazy? It's raining outside. And I'm like, it's just only drizzling. Just put on a raincoat and let's go. And she's like, no, I'm not leaving the house when it's raining. And it isn't just my wife. So last year we had some builders over at our house to do some work, and they were doing some work on the outside and the inside. And then one day it was raining in the morning and the builders didn't show up. And I said to my wife, why haven't the builders showed up? And my wife's like, it's raining, that's probably why they haven't showed up. And I went, well, it's not raining that much. And also they've got work to do inside the house, not just outside. So they could be inside the house, away from the rain, doing work. But no, they didn't show up the whole day. And then the next day when it didn't rain, they came back. And I asked them why they didn't come the day before, and they just looked at me all strange and went, well, it was raining. And I went, okay, I guess that's a cultural difference. Because in Sweden, if you stayed home every time it rained, you wouldn't get anything done, because you have so many more days of rain and snow in Sweden then. And obviously, the whole of Brazil doesn't shut down every time it rains. There's lots of people who keep working when it's raining. But it's something I've noticed with a lot of Brazilians, that they don't like to leave the house when it's raining. Okay, and another change that I've seen in myself since I moved to Brazil is that I've become a lot more relaxed about timekeeping. So we Swedes in general are very focused on time, and especially arriving on time to meetings and events and parties and so on. So in Sweden in general, it's considered rude if you arrive late to things. So for example, if you invite a Swede to a party, in general he'll arrive slightly early or on time, generally not late. And that is very different to Brazil. So in Brazil, yeah, to work meetings and so on, generally it's important to arrive on time, but to social occasions, parties and just gatherings, and for those it's generally okay to arrive late, and that can range from like being 20 minutes late to a couple of hours late. And a lot of times the party host hasn't even finished preparing the party when the party should start. So they're assuming that people are going to arrive like an hour late or something. So yeah, if you're going to a party in Brazil, I would recommend, arrive half an hour late or something, unless you want to arrive on time and help the host kind of finish preparing the party. But saying that, it does depend on where you are in Brazil. So here in the south of Brazil, we have a bit more of a German culture. So here in the south, people are a bit more punctual. So it really does depend on the culture of the area in Brazil that you are. And then also another thing which is connected to this is planning ahead for events. So in Sweden, it's very common for people to have already planned what they're doing each weekend for the next couple of months into the future. So if you want to meet up with some friends, it's very common to agree to meet up in like a month's time, 2 months' time. It's not common to just, agree to meet up the next day or something. And that's very different to Brazil, where it's very common to just make last minute plans to meet up. And if you do suggest, meeting up in like 2 weeks' time or something, then a lot of Brazilians will go, I can't plan that far ahead. Let's chat in 2 weeks' time and agree something. So they don't want to plan a couple of weeks in advance when it comes to social occasions. Obviously, it depends on the person and the occasion, but that's definitely something that I've experienced a lot. And another thing that's changed to me is that I've become a lot more relaxed talking to strangers here in Brazil. So we Swedes can be very cold. We don't like talking to people we don't know. And that can be a big contrast to what it's like here in Brazil. So here in Brazil, it's very common to see strangers just starting to chat to each other. So if you're in a queue or you're in a store, in a waiting room or something, it's very common for the person next to you to just start chatting with you. And that's happened a lot to me. So I mean, sitting in the waiting room at the dentist, the doctor, and some other places, and then people in the waiting room just start chatting to each other. And I just look at that and I go, if this was in Sweden, this waiting room would be silent. There would be no one talking. But now I'm used to how things are in Brazil, and I'm happy to start chatting to strangers. And I just think it's a lot friendlier and nicer that way. And then the final way that Brazil has changed me is that I appreciate the beach a lot more. So in Sweden, you don't really have this culture of going to the beaches next to the sea. I mean, it's probably because we don't have any nice sandy beaches really. But what we do have in Sweden is lots of lakes. And it's very common for people to have a summer home next to the lake in Sweden. And I think it's really nice. So in general, the lakes are very clean, they're not polluted. You've got forests surrounding the lakes. And it's less dangerous swimming in a lake as well, because you can swim out as far as you want. There's no currents or anything. So it's really nice. But in my mind, it doesn't compare to a nice sandy Brazilian beach. And that's partly because the water in the lakes in Sweden, they can be freezing cold, even in summertime. So I mean, it can be a real struggle to go in the water in the lakes in Sweden. And once you've entered, usually you just stay there for a couple of minutes before you start getting too cold, and you need to leave the water again. And then also the summers are pretty short in Sweden as well, and so you don't have that many sunny, hot days. And so the time that you have to enjoy the lakes is pretty limited. And now, having spent many summers at beaches in Santa Catarina, I can tell you I much prefer that than spending a summer at a Swedish lake. Okay, so those are the ways that living in Brazil has changed me. And most of them in a positive way. I guess my beer belly might not agree with that. But apart from that, I think they've been really good changes. So I hope you like this video. Please leave a like, subscribe. If you've got any questions or anything, leave in the commentary below. So thanks for watching. Until next time.